Tonight, the hottest Australia Day in 6 decades. Melanoma researchers are fittingly named Joint Australians of the Year on a long weekend when the UV rating reaches extreme levels. Thousands attend Invasion Day rallies on the first Australia Day since the Voice referendum. A teenage girl dies after two boats collide in Sydney's south. Power outages in North Queensland after tropical cyclone Kirrily makes landfall.
It's sensational from Yannick.
And no more Novak. Sinner knocks out Djokovic in the semi-finals at Melbourne Park. Good evening, Lydia Feng with ABC News. From Bondi in the east to Broken Hill in the west, New South Wales has sweltered through the start of the long weekend. The temperature reached 38.5 at Sydney's Observatory Hill, making it the hottest Australia Day since 1960. Many tried to cool off at beaches and events around the harbour, while others attended protest rallies despite the scorching heat. Even the honours list couldn't escape the sun, with two skin cancer researchers being named Joint Australians of the Year. Alexander Lewis begins our coverage.
After Sydney's warmest night in 4 years, Australia Day dawned to the music of the land's first people. Barangaroo and Pemulwuy were among the faces of Gadigal heroes reflected on the harbour, as the Aboriginal and Australian flags rose in unison atop the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Reflection was the mood at Bondi. And at Government House, jubilation as people from around the world became Australian citizens.
We are welcoming you from across the seas into this, our country.
The joy was shared at ceremonies in Western Sydney.
We are proud of this country, the people, the diversity here. So why not become citizen?
I can't really compare this feeling with anything. It's unique.
A feeling celebrated by other new Australians at Circular Quay.
We're so proud to be here. This is a haven for everyone.
This country is the best in the world.
An ancient smoking ceremony was held on a former ferry, and then the thunder of a 21-gun salute. As the Air Force roulettes rocked up, it was hard to know where to look. A fleet of jet skis chopped up the harbour, while acrobats walked and backflipped on water. As the squadron soared, so did the temperature. Sydney's Observatory Hill reached 38.5 degrees, making it the hottest Australia Day since 1960.
Just enjoying the heat. What do you think of all the ships?
Pretty cool. They look pretty cool. I don't usually see tall ships.
It's 236 years to the day since the first fleet sailed into Sydney Cove. Today, the harbour was filled with vessels old and new, flying the colours of Australia. But many Australians were not celebrating.
No justice, no peace, no racist police!
An Invasion Day rally drew a large crowd in the city.
There should be no such day that should be celebrated when land theft, murder and violence towards another human race should be celebrated.
A group of men wearing black sparked a police operation at North Sydney, disrupting train services this afternoon. In a nearby park, they held up a sign linked to a neo-Nazi group. 6 of them were arrested and more than 50 fined for offensive behaviour. The Premier said a potentially ugly confrontation was avoided thanks to the police, adding, normal people don't celebrate Australia Day with a balaclava on. But for the most part, the best of the Australian spirit was on display.
It's beautiful, the water's clean, the sand is awesome, the people are good. What's not to love?
Families and friends relishing the sizzling beauty of a sunburnt country. Alexander Lewis, ABC News, Sydney.
The recipients of this year's top national honour are calling on Australians to rethink their attitude to being in the sun. Professors Georgina Long and Richard Scollier have been named Joint Australians of the Year for their groundbreaking work in skin cancer treatment. The Sydney-based researchers have helped change melanoma from a fatal diagnosis to a curable disease.
These Australians of the Year have a powerful message about cancer.
I stand here tonight as a terminal brain cancer patient. I'm only 57. I don't want to die.
Once a life-ending diagnosis, Professors Long and Scollier have made melanoma survivable. Their pioneering treatment activates the patient's own immune system, saving thousands of lives. Now they're experimenting with the same science to fight Professor Scollier's cancer.
And make a difference. If not for me, then for others.
On a day many spend under southern skies, the Australians of the Year want the culture of our sunburnt country to change.
There is nothing healthy about a tan. Nothing. Our bronzed Aussie culture is actually killing us.
An awards ceremony that honoured an empire of the sun also honoured the teaching of a language both ancient and contemporary. Yalme Yunupingu has spent 40 years teaching Yolngu language.
When I speak to people, it's with quiet lightning and thunder, called Mararakton.
A force of nature for education and for healing.
Our people are sick and dying, young and old. My message is very clear. Yolngu bush medicine and healing is vital for Yolngu.
The 2024 local hero unearthed Australia's passion for paleontology and a multi-million-dollar boost for outback tourism.
Australia's future is inextricably linked to its past, and our children are its future custodians. The more they understand it, the better they will care for it.
The Queen of the Commonwealth and Olympic Games is the Young Australian of the Year. Australia's swimming great is now in a new lane as an ambassador for UNICEF.
Don't worry about the time it will take to achieve your dreams. We are capable of far more than we realise.
Inspirational Australians with a new platform for good. James Viver, ABC News, Canberra.
Many Indigenous Australians and their supporters have marked the 26th of January with Invasion Day marches and Survival Day events. This year, organisers shared the stage with supporters of the Palestinian cause.
Around the country, thousands gathered and protested at Invasion Day rallies.
We have established here today to call for the government to abolish Australia Day.
In Canberra, AFP officers struggle to hold back demonstrators, with the front of Parliament closed off as a protest march reached the doors. This year, Invasion Day organisers invited Palestinian speakers to share the national spotlight.
I think it's pretty obvious why we're staunchly standing with Palestinian people, and it's because we know what they're going through.
Much like Palestine, always was and always will be Palestinian land.
This was the first major gathering since last year's failed referendum, and emotions ran high.
We're marching for a black future. We're marching for redemption from a failed referendum. We're demanding that white Australia come to the table and actually engage with us in authentic ways.
Issues of poor healthcare, land rights and youth incarceration all featuring in speeches.
A lot of us are born into racism. That's the reality. A lot of us are born into poverty. That's the reality. But this government, they criminalise poverty.
Every government in the history of Australia has failed Aboriginal people.
Invasion Day is our day of remembrance. It is a day we honour the people we no longer have standing with us.
Elsewhere, families gathered in a more relaxed setting, others holding Survival Day events.
Here in Sydney, high temperatures didn't deter thousands from showing up. The mood here is emotional and energised as protesters demand a new era for Indigenous rights. Carly Williams, ABC News, Sydney.
From artists and athletes to public servants and academics, just over 1,000 people have been recognised for their service in this year's Australia Day Honours List. And for only the second time, more women than men have received an award in the General Division.
This year's Order of Australia includes household names like plastic surgeon and 2005 Australian of the Year, Professor Fiona Wood, Her spray-on skin technique saved severely burned victims in the aftermath of the Bali bombings.
It is extraordinary to be recognised by one's peers and the community in this way. It really is, sort of takes your breath away.
In Adelaide, Dr. David Squirrel couldn't continue practicing after losing most of his sight and hearing in 2008. He spent the next 15 years advocating for improved accessibility for people with disability.
It's a challenge, and one has to learn to adapt. Yes, you can get depressed, dejected, but you have to rise above that.
Former politicians featured too, like Lara Giddings, who at 23 was the youngest woman elected to an Australian parliament, before eventually becoming Tasmania's first female premier in 2010.
My dad's no longer with us, but he was a man who loved his medals, and he had an Order of Australia medal himself, an OAM though, and I know how much that meant to him and just how proud he would be today.
Professor of Criminology at the University of Queensland, Lorraine Mazerol, is one of only 4 Companions of the Order this year, the highest rank. Her research advances innovative policing methods.
My research also shows that police, when they work in partnership with communities, when they work in partnership with other agencies like schools, they can actually be much more effective than when they work alone.
As an Aboriginal community police officer, Yolngu woman Bettina Dangambar is recognized for her work combating domestic violence and training police in providing culturally appropriate support.
It's very important because it builds a bridge on how we can work in both ways, Palanda and Yolngu.
Also recognized was colorful and at times controversial photographer Bill Henson.
I see it as a vote of confidence in Australia's culture, and particularly in its visual arts.
What about over here? What plants have you got?
100-year-old Lillian Reese is the oldest recipient this year. While most people relax in their 80s, she dedicated her twilight years volunteering with sick children and their families.
People are not as kind or generous to each other. People always say, I haven't got time, but we always made time.
Golden advice from a golden girl and a member of the Order of Australia. Nabil Al-Nashar, ABC News.
Let's bring in Jeremy Fernandez as celebrations continue. Jeremy, it's shaping up to be a big night.
Lydia, that call change has come through, thankfully, at just the right time. The culmination of the day's reflection and celebration, the Australia Day live concert, is about to get underway here on the forecourt of the Sydney Opera House. Thousands of people have lined the foreshore for one of Sydney's biggest public events of the year. Tonight, a stunning showcase headlined by some of Australia's best performers, belting out classics from an all-Aussie songbook. Waiting in the wings backstage, Ganga Jang, Casey Donovan, Dami Im, Kate Miller-Heidke and William Barton, just to name a few. They've all been deep in rehearsals for a production that's truly on a spectacular scale, culminating in a massive fireworks spectacular and light show, plus jet skis, flyboarders and lit vessels and tugboats in formation on the water. This will be a time to honour the vast array of Aussies from across the country to reflect, respect and celebrate our National Day. Lydia.
Enjoy your night. Thank you, Jeremy. A boating accident in southern Sydney has claimed the life of a teenage girl. 2 small aluminium vessels collided this morning at Grays Point. Police say the 16-year-old was treated by paramedics at the scene and later died in St George Hospital. 2 16-year-old boys were also taken to the hospital for mandatory testing. The boats have been seized as part of an investigation into the circumstances of the crash. Tens of thousands of North Queenslanders are spending a second night in the dark, with ex-tropical cyclone Kirrily wreaking havoc with the region's network. The Chainsaw Army was out in force, beginning to mop up from last night's Category 2 system. But much of the region is relieved to have avoided major damage.
The severe system brought powerful winds and intense swells. Oh, man! But Kirrily's bark was mostly worse than her bite. It began as a Category 3, but at the last minute, the tropical cyclone crossed the coast as a Category 2, just north of Townsville.
Parts of the city really only saw the effects of a Category 1.
It's really windy. You can really feel the wind shaking the whole house, but aside from that, pretty all right.
Winds up to 107 kilometres per hour were recorded. Off Townsville, this 30-foot yacht smashed and sank. The boat was uninsured.
It can't be a nice moment. We've all had close calls, so it's a bit of a scary thing.
There were similar scenes at Airlie Beach. A crane was called in to salvage it. Across North Queensland, strong winds have uprooted trees.
A bit more damage than I'd expected, I guess.
Crushing cars, twisting metal, ploughing through fences and bringing down power lines.
Probably a couple of days' worth of mess, but not too bad, nothing like Yazzie.
This Ayr church miraculously escaped a tree falling through its roof, but authorities say the region has dodged a bullet.
There has been minimal property damage. The biggest impact at this stage is on the energy network.
More than 60,000 customers lost power. Ergon says it could take crews up to a week to restore.
We've got about approximately 100 on the ground here locally. We've got 600 mobilising into Townsville over today and tomorrow.
Despite a big clean-up ahead, there's a sense of relief here in North Queensland that Kirrily's damage wasn't more severe. The weather system has now moved inland and authorities say it's still posing a risk. In the Gulf country, bridges are already going under. Other areas, though, missed out on the big falls.
Definitely nothing like what had been forecast.
Graziers are on the lookout for more. Lily Nothling, ABC News, Townsville.
The federal government has begun selling its reworked Stage 3 tax cuts, arguing they're carefully designed to relieve pressure on Middle Australia. But it's not just voters that need to be convinced, with the changes facing a potentially tricky path through Parliament. Here's political reporter Tom Lowry.
The pitch? The bigger tax cut for more than 11 million Australians.
Including 2.9 million Australians who were going to get nothing on the 1st of July.
And the protest.
We have a liar in the lodge.
It's just a major break of trust. It's a betrayal.
OK. The government is selling its tax cut turnaround, arguing it's putting money in the pocket of Middle Australia.
When you have cost of living pressures on low and middle income workers, then you have a responsibility to do something about it.
The proposal halves the original tax cut for wealthier Australians and bolsters the benefits for workers earning less than about $145,000 a year.
We know that it's not just 1.8 million people who are worse off under this package, but over the coming years it's going to be over 4 million Australians who are affected by it.
The government will need either the Coalition or Greens to back their plan to get it through Parliament. The Coalition hasn't committed either way, but the Greens are clear they want more.
If we're going to change the legislation, then we should do it in a way that really supports low and middle income earners.
We'll wait and see. We'll wait for them to go through their mechanisms as well. We'll talk with all of the crossbenchers.
Convincing the Parliament is one thing, convincing the public is another. The risk for the government is that voters happily accept and forget a tax cut, but remember a broken promise. Tom Lowry, ABC News, Canberra.
Israel says it's looking into allegations IDF troops opened fire on crowds in Gaza City, killing 20 Palestinians and injuring 150 waiting in line for food. Thousands of Palestinians are continuing to flee the main southern city of Khan Yunis, where Israeli tanks have battered areas around 2 hospitals. Meanwhile, near the Israeli border, families of hostages have attempted to block the Kerem Shalom crossing in an effort to stop aid trucks going into the strip until all hostages are released. The International Court of Justice is preparing to rule on interim measures requested against the Israeli government over its war in Gaza. It comes after South Africa filed a case against Israel, accusing it of committing genocide. Europe correspondent Isabella Higgins is in The Hague for the ruling. Isabella, take us through what's expected to happen later today.
Well, Lydia, all eyes will be on the UN's top court, with many around the world expected to tune into this highly anticipated decision. Now, while it could take years to have a final outcome in this case, what we can expect in a matter of hours is an interim ruling based on the emergency measures requested by South Africa to try and rein in Israel's assault on Gaza. So earlier this month, we heard the first legal arguments from both countries. Lawyers for South Africa say that the death and devastation caused by Israel's military in Gaza amounts to genocide, and claim that genocidal intent has been expressed across all levels of Israel's government. Now, Israel's legal team has categorically rejected this. They say that South Africa is grossly distorting the truth and that their actions are justified under international law after Hamas's attack on October 7. So what the 17 judges of the World Court have had to consider is if, whether at first glance or prima facie, the allegations against Israel could constitute a breach of the Genocide Convention, and whether these emergency measures are needed to protect the rights of people in Gaza. Now, some have gone as far as describing the emergency measures put in place by this court as having the ability to act as a sort of temporary restraining order in this conflict. But the thing is, while this interim ruling is legally binding, it can be ignored, and this court has no way of enforcing it.
Europe correspondent Isabella Higgins reporting. Former US President Donald Trump has continued to deny sexually attacking writer E. Jean Carroll, claiming the allegation was a hoax. Mr. Trump's testimony in a civil defamation trial lasted roughly 4 minutes and was the first time he spoke in court about the writer's claims. A previous jury found the former president had committed the assault in the 1990s, and Ms. Carroll was awarded $7.6 million. The court will now decide what additional damages, if any, Mr. Trump must pay Ms. Carroll over defamatory comments he made about her in 2019. Spain's former soccer chief, Luis Rubiales, will face trial for kissing player Jenny Hermoso without her consent. The investigative judge ruled that Rubiales' kiss after the World Cup final in Sydney was unconsented and carried out unilaterally and in a surprising fashion. State prosecutors accused Rubiales of sexual assault and of allegedly trying to coerce Hermoso to publicly support him during the growing backlash against him. The trial date is still to be determined. An inspired bowling performance from the West Indies has Australia on the ropes midway through the day 2 of the Gaba Test. The West Indies posted a first innings total of 311 before their fast bowlers reduced Australia to 4 for 24. Khawaja and Carey have done their best to rescue the innings. A short time ago, the Aussies were 5 for 149.
The West Indies showed they had plenty of fight on day 1, with the middle and lower order helping the tourists recover from 5 for 64 to go to stumps at 8 for 266. Joshua Da Silva's 79 and 71 from Kavem Hodge did most of the scoring damage, while the blistering 32 off just 22 deliveries from Alzari Joseph frustrated Australia's quicks.
No respect at all from Joseph.
We showed some fight today. We showed fight in Adelaide with the ball. But yeah, it's about just showing people that West Indies, we're still here, and we want to show people that we deserve to be here.
On a gloomy second day, the fight continued, Kevin Sinclair making the most of his Test debut. Newly crowned ICC Cricketer of the Year Pat Cummins brought himself on and immediately created a chance which went begging. When the wicket finally came, it was entirely of the West Indies making.
Oh, run out. Gotta be out.
Before Sinclair made his half-century, as the tourists were eventually dismissed for 311. Australia's run chase started in disastrous fashion. Steve Smith gone for 6 in his third innings as an opener. He wasn't alone in struggling against the tourist bowlers.
Edged away, great catch! That is a screamer!
Marnus Labuschagne, Cameron Green and Travis Head all departing before the long break as the hosts collapsed to 4 for 24. Mitch Marsh launched a counter-attack.
Up and over.
But it was short-lived. The all-rounder gone for 21. Australia's perilous position could have been worse. Alex Carey lucky to survive when the ball hit the top of the stumps, but didn't dislodge the bails as the tourists continued to crank up the pressure on day 2. Tom Wildey, ABC News.
Novak Djokovic is human after all. Chasing an 11th Australian Open title, the Serbian's reign at Melbourne Park is over after a shock loss to young Italian star Jannik Sinner. Sinner outplayed the world number one over 4 thrilling sets.
A win for the new generation of tennis.
There's a new king in Melbourne.
Jannik Sinner has become the first Italian to reach an Australian Open singles final, beating a man who hadn't lost at Melbourne Park for more than 6 years. The young Italian was on top early.
What a start.
He broke the Serbian serve and won the opening set in just 35 minutes. Sinner's clean ball striking stunned Djokovic, who lamented unforced errors. Djokovic tried to get the pro-Serbian crowd involved, but Sinner, bursting with confidence, took the second set.
Sinner smashing this semi-final.
You can't keep a champion down.
Amazing.
Djokovic forced the third to a tiebreak, saved a match point before staying alive in the contest.
It's Djokovic on the breaker. We're going for.
But 22-year-old Sinner held his nerve in the fourth.
And this time he breaks.
Up a break, Sinner served for the match again, and a piece of history.
The confidence from end of last year has kept the belief that I can play against the best players in the world, and I'm really happy that I can play Sunday my first final, and let's see how it goes. But I'm really happy. I come here with a smile and I try my best.
And defending champion Aryna Sabalenka will go into tomorrow's final as the raging favourite. Her straight sets victory over Coco Gauff was revenge for losing to the American at the US Open. It will be an enormous challenge for her next opponent, China's Qinwen Zheng, who will make her Grand Slam final debut. Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne Park.
Super Rugby club the Melbourne Rebels are reportedly on the brink of voluntary administration. The Rebels have confirmed an insolvency firm is looking into ways to resolve the club's debt, understood to be around $9 million. Founded in 2010, the union team plans to make a decision on its future early next week. And to the weather, and Tom, Australia Day sizzled across the state.
Lydia, temperatures soared as much as 15 degrees above average, and also some impressive cloud features. Now, this hole punch cloud was captured by my predecessor, Graham Creed, who suffered through a high above 42 degrees today across the inland Hunter. Sydney woke to a cloudy and warm morning. The temperature climbed to 30 degrees by 9 a.m. Now, the sun did appear late morning and combined with fresh northwesterly winds to send the thermometer to the high 30s. That was despite overcast skies returning by midday. Now, Sydney's minimum of 24 was 6 above average and our warmest night in 4 years. The high of 38.5 was more than 12 above the average and the hottest Australia Day in 64 years. The airport was the warmest station, hitting 41. That was before a southerly buster arrived from 2 p.m. It took around 2 hours to spread through Sydney. The airport dropped 10 degrees in only 10 minutes and saw gusts to 70 kilometres per hour. Now, the minimums were uncomfortable for much of the state, apart from the far south. Orange 23, that was 10 above average. Maximums today included 41 in Kempsey, their warmest day in 7 years, along with 42 in Taree and 40 in Newcastle, both 4-year highs. On the satellite then, well, a band of cloud over the south did drop up to 30 millimetres on the Alps to 9 a.m. Thick cloud and heavy rain from ex-tropical cyclone Kirrily has now moved inland to northwest Queensland. On the chart then, well, this trough marks the position of our southerly change. It will stall over the north tomorrow and trigger showers and storms. Now, around the country, it's hot for the cricket in Brisbane with a possible shower and storm. Darwin can expect rain for the 20th consecutive day. Now, for the northeast, cooler tomorrow, particularly for the south. Medium chance of showers and storms for the Hunter. It's a high chance elsewhere, and there's the risk of severe storms for the northern rivers and the northern ranges. For the southeast, there's chance of showers on the coast tomorrow, but it's only a slight risk for the eastern ranges. Expect a dry day for the top of the ranges and to the west. To the west then, still hot for the northern inland, 40 in Moree. Chance of showers and severe storms for the northern slopes, but it is looking dry across the remainder. On the waters, strong winds for the far north and seas from 2 to 3 metres. Now for Sydney, a more comfortable night, but still a few degrees above average. Cloudy tomorrow with the chance of a shower for the outer west, but it's only a very slight risk elsewhere. Highs from 24 to 27 across Sydney and surrounds. 23 should be the top for Katoomba. Now, the sun will rise at 6:10, setting at 8:05, and ahead, mostly cloudy Sunday. There is the chance of a light shower or two, 27 to 29 degrees. Should be warmer on Monday, 29 to 31. Then warm with the chance of a shower for Tuesday and Wednesday. Not a huge amount in that, perhaps just a few millimetres. And warm and dry conditions returning then for Thursday, Friday. Lydia.
Thanks, Tom. That's all from ABC News. Stay with us now for Australia Day Live.